Hello, welcome to the Week in Review. I'm your host, Mamadou Mbouch. This is the program where we take 10 or so stories of the week and delve into them, sink our teeth into some of the talking points of these stories. And this week, we've seen the spike in the coronavirus disease, and so is the number of the health workers who are also getting infected. And also this week, the Red Cross ran into some difficulty at the ferry crossing. How so? How coordinated are our responses to the COVID? As well, the curfew. We sent some of our reporters with the people, the security forces who are meant to enforce the regulations. And so how compliant have we been with this regulation? And then the COVID-19 vaccine. Suddenly a country in the world has decided that it has found a vaccine for this COVID-19. Today on this program, the Week in Review. I've got with me Mamadou Lamin Choi, a correspondent, QTV correspondent, who's covered actually most of these stories to help me chew over some of these talking points. Welcome to the Week in Review, Mamadou Lamin Choi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Much, for having me.
Thank you. So we'll kick off straight into our first story. We reported this week that our health workers, nearly 200 of them, have been infected with the COVID-19 in a time where we need them more than ever. This is surely quite worrying. Let's just take a look at this clip.
In the Gambia, the number of infections among nurses and doctors is spiking at a rate that is interrupting our national response to COVID-19. Close to 200 health workers in both private and public hospitals now have the virus, of whom close to 50 are doctors who are receiving treatment.
Mr. Choi, right there, you did the story. I mean, 200 health workers, because with us already we know that initially we really didn't have enough. And then when you have this number of people inactive, because when they're infected, perhaps they become quarantined and that sort of thing. What did you make of the story when you were investigating it and reporting it?
Absolutely, Mr. Mboch. Looking at the situation of our healthcare system, as you just put it, we do not have enough doctors. Here, let me say, healthcare workers, nurses and doctors. And it is quite a disturbing situation, because when a country doesn't have enough healthcare workers, during this time of the pandemic, quite a lot of them now, I want to believe that the number would reach that 200 or beyond. So, the proportion of the number of, doctors that we have in the country, nurses, is really low. And as we continue registering cases, the demand for healthcare workers is going high. And now that because of the rate of infections, most of our healthcare workers, or a lot of them, are becoming infected. This can really cripple our national response in fighting against COVID-19.
Absolutely, and one must ask, why is it so? Because recently we had the Association of Nurses and Midwives. They were disgruntled about certain things. So one wonders, what is the issue here? Was it about money? Was it about PPE? Were they adequately protected? We were hearing that we had all these donations from Jack Ma, from all over, and all of this money. So one thought that perhaps the frontline workers would have been prioritized, given that they was having to, literally, physically fight these things, the front line. So what happened there?
So we've been receiving a lot of support from the international community. Of course, in our country today, we wouldn't say we do not have protective equipment. But having protective equipment in our country and making them available to the healthcare workers when the need arises, that is also a concern. When I talk to the Association of Doctors, Nurses, etc., so they told me that access to personal protective equipment has been a problem, despite the fact that we have some in our country. So making them, having enough stock of PPEs and making them available for our healthcare workers at a time needed has really been a problem, and which some of them describe as administrative lapses or problems.
But this is it, because all the time we've been getting some kind of reassurance from the government. They were giving us the impression that they were quite prepared, and WHO was helping in training people and all of these things, the organizational elements. But now we are beginning to see that we are not sure. We're becoming skeptical of that because of the outcomes we are beginning to see.
Mm-hmm. So the issue is not only about the personal protective equipment that they've raised, but protection. They raised the issue of protection. Of course, personal protective equipment really contributes towards that. But when healthcare workers, those who are on the front line, will be tested and they will have to wait for their result for 4 days or more than that, and they are still interacting among themselves, they are still interacting with patients, that is quite alarming. And I think that has been also a contributing factor towards the rise in the number of COVID-19 infections among nurses and doctors in our country.
Absolutely. So what next? One wonders how the ministry would deal with this, what's going on. Perhaps to stem, to arrest that widespread of the infection among healthcare workers.
Absolutely. And that's what they're saying. Some of them would tell me that they're not for money, they're not in for money, they're not calling for money or whatsoever, but they want assurance of protection from government. And there should be priority. Of course, we understand that our country's healthcare system is becoming overwhelming. We're having, most people who are tested having to wait for more than, 4 days or 5 days or whatsoever. But those who are on the front line, like healthcare workers, are demanding that there should be a priority from government. If they are tested, at least shouldn't take that long for them to at least know what happens to them. And also the other thing that they're saying is there should be an accommodation for them, because if a frontline worker is still doesn't have accommodation from government, at least to be isolated from their family, it means the life of their family, also health of their family is put at risk. So there were a series of demands that healthcare workers demanded from government, especially the COVID-19 response team who were on a strike. Government had made promises to remedy the problems, addressing the problems, but most of them, according to the Association of Resident Doctors, haven't yet been fulfilled. So these are problems. So they're not forthcoming when it comes to solution from government, according to them.
We'll see how this thing unfolds, really. To our next story, and the government has announced new testing, quarantine and isolation guidelines. Let's just take a look at this clip and see some of these points the government have made.
However, the Minister of Health is taking an alternative approach based on our realities. Patients with mild or no symptoms as well as no underlying chronic conditions may be placed under home isolation if the home environment is safe and will not expose family members or people living with the patient at risk. The guidelines also observe the WHO recommended discharge criteria for all COVID-19 confirmed cases, regardless of isolation location or disease severity. A patient with symptoms for 2 days could be discharged from isolation after 10 days, plus at least 3 days since his or her symptoms first emerged. For a patient with symptoms for 14 days, he or she could be discharged from isolation after 14 days, plus at least 3 days from the date when his or her symptoms emerged. And for a patient with symptoms for 30 days, the patient can be discharged 30 days, plus 3 days after his or her symptoms first emerged.
Mr. Chai there, the key word you used in your report, alternative. They've decided to come with an alternative in spite of the WHO guidelines. For a very long time, certain analysts have been saying that we should use these generic guidelines and adapt them to our situation. It seems that they've finally cutting onto that idea.
Absolutely. These guidelines coming from the Ministry of Health is tailor-made with our realities. According to them, there are WHO standards, but based on our realities, we wouldn't able to at least fulfill those realities. So now they're having to take some guidelines in order to make sure that it commensurates with our healthcare sector. It's becoming overwhelming. It's limited. According to the guideline, it started by saying that due to the limited capacity of our healthcare system, WHO, although has some recommendations when it comes to infected or suspected cases of COVID-19, but we are taking these measures based on the realities on the ground, and I think that is very honest of the government in responding to the problems COVID-19 is posing to our country.
Absolutely, and one of these realizations is that the fact that it's costly. The cost has been going up, isn't it? Now they're using hotels. It costs a lot, really. So they had to think about it, the cost.
Yeah, there has been a lot of money. Government has been spending in quarantine. Testing. The national response towards COVID-19 demands a lot of money, and of course, our economy. We do not have a strong economy. Most of the basis of the economy today, the productive basis of the economy, as a result of the effects of COVID-19, are not productive enough. They're not giving us what we need in order to develop our economy. So going across the world, this is what is happening. But we have a very fragile health sector. We have a very weak economy, and therefore, with these measures that they are bringing forward, we really cut cost. And I've been following social media comments. Calling government to step up and then bring measures such as this. For example, we cannot allow anybody to enter into our country and then being taken to quarantine at the cost of the taxpayers' money. So what people have been demanding is that anybody who is coming into the country now, what should be done is let them pay for their own quarantine cost. So some of these things came up in the guidelines, which at least I think can help government save up the money that they've been spending in our COVID-19 response and then focus on other priority areas. You cut your coat according to your size, fold your coat according to your clothes. So that is very necessary, and I think that is what government has done.
That's absolutely so. But again, time and again, we have talked about that lack of enforcement. Having the regulation is one thing, but again, enforcing it is quite another. So what guarantees do we have that this time around we'll have the proper enforcement of these regulations?
Mm-hmm. So I believe as a responsible, it was a responsible decision to come up with these guidelines, but they have to be very responsive in their responsibility of enforcing these guidelines, because if not, then as a country we're failing in our response to COVID-19. So they are very going through the document is very beautiful measures that they're taking based on our realities.
At least reasonable.
Reasonable, yes. Mm-hmm. So I think that will really help a lot if enforcement is put in place. But Gambia is known for having very beautiful policies, nice policies, but at the end of the day, we've seen what has been happening when it comes to the regulations that they've been bringing, and I think in the future or now, we need enforcement more than ever. So especially guidelines such as this that will cut expenditure. We're not earning much, but we are giving out a lot, a lot of expenditure, less earning, much expenditure. So this will cut that, and enforcement is highly needed. Let's see how it will play out in the few days coming.
Absolutely, because the whole point of these regulations is for one to enforce them, otherwise it defeats the purpose. You are not going to see the outcome. Thank you very much there, Mr. Choi, for your views there. And next, to the Red Cross at the ferry terminal. Quite interestingly, we heard that they were not allowed to cross. Let's just take a look at this clip and listen to the head of the Red Cross, Alassane Senghor.
We crossed the ferry, went to the North Bank to do a burial. On their way back, they were asked to park the vehicle on one side. And then they loaded the ferry and they left. Now, this is unacceptable. These are volunteers who are serving humanity. These are volunteers who are on PPEs. It's hot, and there is a time limit to when you can be in that PPE. And it's unacceptable.
Unacceptable. What do you say to that, Mr. Choi?
I believe his comments really is as a result of what happened at the ferry terminal, and I also heard from the response from the ferry services director or manager or whatsoever, saying that there should always be a prior notice for them, and there are a lot of problems happening around that end. And Red Cross, they are doing a voluntary services for this country, and then we need them. As a country, we need the Red Cross now. So for me personally, I believe it is unacceptable, because we are in a time of crisis. Emergency situation demands that we take emergency measures, urgent measures. So leaving them there waiting or denying them access to the ferry terminal, subjecting them to bureaucracies or whatsoever, really doesn't tell well. This is a national response against COVID-19. The Red Cross are offering voluntary services in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. An emergency situation demands that we take emergency measures, and this has to be collaborative partnership between the Red Cross and the government. So it's unacceptable, Mr. Mboch.
So, but what does it tell you about really the level of coordination? One would have thought that they would have come up with some kind of modus operandi, given that it's the Red Cross that is doing this particular activity in this emergency and may need to cover the whole country, a humanitarian organization. One would have thought that perhaps these things would have been planned. What do you think of the coordination?
We've been working with the ministry, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, and coordination really in our country. I spoke to some healthcare workers who put it to me that our national response to COVID-19 really lacks coordination. And if things are put on the right way, this shouldn't have happened. And seeing this happening would tell you there were some gaps, coordination, problem that emerged and bringing something like this. But at this moment that we are in a time of crisis, one wouldn't have expected. It was so surprising that something like that happened. And it looks like there is more work needs to be done in ensuring that there is proper coordination in government and between the Ministry of Health and the Gambia Red Cross Society and other institutions. When I say the government, really the ferry service is involved, the executive, everyone. So coordination really matters a lot in this process, and when it lacks, it brings chaotic situations like this.
Absolutely, because here one might wonder, who should come up with the guideline as to what to do? Is it that the government that's going to decide that, we're going to let them go, free, they don't have to pay, that's the Red Cross? Or is it that the ferry authorities should have shown their judgment, looking at the situation, show their judgment, and perhaps talk to government and tell them that this is what we were doing, whatever compensation you need to give us. But there should have been that, because when we heard the representative from the ferry authorities, I think it was Mr. Guy, what he said was, as far as he was concerned, they have their rules. All vehicles, private, commercial, must pay. And that was quite curious for me, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So we expect something like that to happen. But when I started responding, in fact, your first question, I said we are in an emergency situation and it needs urgent decisions, quick decision making. Sometimes we have rules and regulations, but a particular situation demands that we adjust and then quickly make reasonable actions, which I believe one wouldn't even hold you accountable to at the end of the day. So quick decision making in leadership, there is quick decision making, which happens. We have a bureaucratic, system of governance, a lot of bureaucracies that one is subjected to. Before this happens, we have these rules, we have this and that. That really slows the whole process, and that has, really affected our governance, structure, the operations, of governance. And now that we are in a time of crisis, at least I think we can suspend some part of these, rules and regulations. Normal situations demands that we go by them, but abnormal situation demands that sometimes we make reasonable decisions, quick decisions, in order to, rescue a crisis situation, and that is what is expected, in leadership. For me, that is what I would have done.
Yes, that's the mentality of managing a crisis, as it were, isn't it? Quick decision making and the like. So we hope that that would be normalized, it would be regularized, because that it has come to the fore now.
I believe it wouldn't happen again. There was a misunderstanding, and both the ferry service, government is fighting a pandemic, Gambia Red Cross is supporting, but sometimes misunderstanding can happen, and we believe it wouldn't happen again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much there, Mohamed Lamin Choi. Now to our next story. Our grade 12s are about to take their exams, but some of the students have expressed anxiety over some of the risks that they'll be taking in going to take their exams, especially put in the context of the spiking numbers of infectious cases in this country. Let's just take a look at this clip.
You reach at the apex of graduating, then your life is put at risk. Like this virus, we all know is deadly. Yeah, and its modes of transmission is very, very fast.
We are not like protesting or demanding anything from the ministry. We just airing our concern. We don't want anyone to misunderstand us. But this is really a risk that they are taking.
Mr. Choi, I have to say this. As far as I'm aware, they had been going to school, wasn't it? One of the relaxations that the president announced some time back was for the grade 12s and for the grade 9s to go back and prepare for the exams. So if they accepted that, why not with just going to take the exams? I don't quite understand this. Maybe I think you covered that story, didn't you?
Yes.
So tell us what's particularly the issue with taking the exams.
There is health concerns. They all have the fear that we're having spike in the number of COVID-19 cases, and they're not foreseeing enough steps taken by the ministry. Of course, grade 9 students had to return back to school. Grade 12s also had to return back to school. The grade 9 students have now completed their examination, and unfortunately, just few weeks before, grade 12 exams, we've been registering, community transmission, a lot of infections, from the community. So when that was discovered, the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, the government's regulations, new measures, put learning on hold for the grade 12s. And they were asked to stay at home and then wait for the examination, which is on Monday, inshallah. So now, why? For me, the point is, why wouldn't they continue the few weeks that they were left with, but they were asked to go back home and then wait for the examination? What were they running from? They were running from the virus. They were, maybe one will, think that it is on the basis of protecting them from the virus. They were asked to stay at home and then wait for the examination. And Monday is the examination, but they're still having to go. So for me, I really don't see, the point. And what they're saying is that they do not foresee that the right steps are put in place to make sure that they are not infected. And one of them said this, that going back to school, we all realize that there is community transmission of the virus, and all grade 12 students are going back to school, but who knows who is infected, and students are likely to interact among themselves. And she suggested mass testing. At least, she says there should have been a mass testing of all the grade 12 students to separate those who are suspected or infected with the rest. If not, then that can really contribute towards a disaster.
Absolutely. So what you appear here to be telling me is that there has been a kind of mixed messaging, this toing and froing, wasn't it? At first they opened, and then when the numbers spiked, they closed again. So that mixed messaging and the like. But again, the permanent secretary, wasn't it PS Louis Moses Mendy? He said that they had put certain measures in place to ensure the safety of the students taking the exams. I mean, do the students believe the PS? One wonders.
I question one of them, that at least you were asked to go back to school for some weeks ahead of the examination, and the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education had revealed their plans to make sure that the students are safe. There was a safe return to school. Was that promise fulfilled? Were the measures promised by the ministry taken? I asked this question to one of them. He said that didn't happen. And they, some of them would even tell me that in school buses, they will be jam-packed in school buses. A lot of them, some sitting, standing, being transported from one place to another, So this is what happens normally. School buses are really filled up, with students. So what was happening before COVID-19 is still happening when it comes to transporting students from their respective areas of residence to school. So according to some of them, they really didn't see much difference. Students were still interacting. At some point when school resumed, there were some spacing between students. A number of students, at least 25 students per class. I spoke to some of them who told me at the end of the day that it didn't continue. So they have the fear that due to previous experience, the same thing might happen again. And the permanent secretary is saying that they are putting safety measures in place. At least 15 buses will be provided to ensure there is safe distancing among the students. Schools will be fumigated, highlighting the measures that they will take in order to protect the students from the virus. But that doesn't seem to convince the student.
Absolutely. Just one quick one before we move on to our next story. When I listened to your report, there was this element of the risks that they were taking with the COVID-19, but some of them also talked about the level of preparation, that sort of thing. So it made me wonder, what really precisely is the issue? Is it COVID-19 or is it the level of preparation? Is one idea piggybacking on another? What is going on there? Shouldn't it be more focused at this point?
That's another area also that they've raised, and the fact that not much was covered in their syllabus. And because of that, they believe that there wasn't enough preparation. There was broadcast lesson. In March, the president made a declaration, schools were closed, and then after they resumed. But unfortunately for the grade 12, they didn't spend, much contact hours with their teachers, at school. And from there, they were asked to go back to school, and some of them would tell me that majority or most part of their syllabus was not covered. So they are not really prepared enough, and perhaps they think that government or the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, the thinking that the students have is that the ministry could suspend or postpone the examination, which the ministry doesn't have power to do. At least even Nigeria tried to convince other member countries in a virtual meeting that they are not prepared as a country. They were very honest to say that they are prepared enough as a country, and they wanted postponement, but there is a minimum number that a country needs for a backing in order to secure a postponement, which Nigeria couldn't. And the PS is telling me if Nigeria couldn't, they believe that they wouldn't able to get that also. So what he also was telling me, that the students claim that they didn't cover most part of their syllabus was really inaccurate. And when the president made his declaration, closing schools, according to the PS, then students were already facing their mock examination. So not, much was left, for them to at least face their examination. So there are controversies between students and the ministry as to the realities on the ground.
That's it. So many issues there. But all the same, the exams has been scheduled.
The exam is going to happen
on the
17th.
On the 17th.
And that's Monday.
On Monday. We'll see what happens there. Thank you very much there, Mahmoud Lamin. And now we'll go for a short break, but remain tuned, because when we come back, we're going to discuss the security forces. They've been going round and about recently since the curfew was announced. They've been going round and about, and some of our reporters were with them, and we'll see actually what happened. How compliant have we been with the curfew? We'll be back in a moment.
sunkuto fele nyenyare fika fintile
finto hani nganya bunkono nganya koba kono beta birolela
ilo sisi wani nyimpare ba tirinte jagal tare nkoto na tiro le nyanta na la kontonga ndum felentin na lol nin kembol bela be sinande mekela nyaadi
mbuka tabiro ke di lolas oryx gas nka tabiro ke ni wolela alana yata ateriata asoniata anite no la je na fulale sang mbatu ne fu kilingola tanin tilobe boyle ma
Oryx gas anintol fofo Oryx gas isa soto no atlas la dinkiral beto nyimbanko kan.
From an early age, we value the feeling of speed, the thrill of the wind as we rush to our destinations, the feel of our feet bounding over the ground, the way the world blurs as we rush by. Faster, faster than a ray of light, I'm flying. I have one speed, I have one gear. Keep on moving, I won't stop till I get there. Want to experience speed? Then subscribe to the Gambia's 4G LTE mobile network, QCell. With speeds of up to 45 megabytes per second, you can get online in the blink of an eye. The fastest browsing, stream videos faster, do much more faster. Just dial *335# to join the fastest club. QCell's 4G LTE mobile network. Go faster. For more information, call 111. QCell, Senior Boss. We innovate, others follow.
Hello, welcome back to the Week in Review, where we delve behind the headlines and try to chew over some of the talking points of the news stories of the past week. I'm joined here today by Mamadou Laming Choi, QTV correspondent. Mr. Choi, let's go straight to our next story. Here, the security forces, they've been going out and about at 10 o'clock to enforce the curfew regulation recently introduced by the president. Some of our reporters were sent with them so that we'll get a sense of how compliant have we been with this new regulation. Just take a look at this clip.
People are really complying. Yeah, I'll once again say that about 95% of the population are complying with this, curfew time. They respected it.
That was quite encouraging. He's even given us a statistic. About 95% of people have been observing, compliant with this new regulation. Mr. Choi, your views on that?
For the statistics, 95%. I don't know how, he got that statistic. And given the reality here, perhaps what he wanted to say in the Greater Banjul area, people are complying. But to give statistics to say that 95% are complying, I don't see it from coming from a survey. Is an opinion, estimation, that he was trying to give there. So we've seen improvement. One can say there have been improvement in the wearing of face masks. There have been improvement the first day of the curfew, the first night of the curfew. I was out with them, and I was so impressed with the level of compliance among the people in the Greater Banjul area. So there has been improvement, there has been compliance, and one can say that majority of the people around the Greater Banjul area, one can observe, out of my observation, majority were complying. But to say 95% of maybe the country or where or whatsoever, that is a subject for scrutiny.
I definitely understand you, but for me, I take it as a sort of, it was just an impressionistic view. I mean, for instance, we understand that on the first night, about 24, that was the report, about 24 or so people were arrested, for breaking the curfew regulation. But by the fifth night, so it was much better. So I think he wanted to generate, he wanted to give us that sense of, far more people are observing it, are keeping to it, than are breaking it, which is really
it is the reality, and that is what I have said. In fact, when I was out with them in the first night of the curfew, we've realized that most Gambians in the Greater Banjul area were not out. They were observing, the curfew, complying, which is quite, impressive. Curfews are put in place, as a measure towards at least containing a crisis situation. Now, in this case, we're talking about a pandemic, and a spike in the number of community transmission demands that actions like this be taken by government, and we've seen the security forces going out to enforce them. To what extent? Of course, the police and the army are involved in the process. So we'll be going round. We wouldn't only, be assessing the situation as to, the level of compliance. We would also be going around, different parts of the country, if possible, to observe, to investigate, and then see whether, as a country, we are complying enough.
Absolutely, but again, I've heard, certain critics, if you like, express the view that, well, how effective would this be? That 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, curfew. What difference would it make? For instance, on the face of it, just as you've said, on the face of it, it seems like, a sensible thing to do. But if you do the work, they do modeling and that sort of thing, what difference would it make? We've heard some people ask that question. What difference would it make? What tangible, quantifiable difference? What do you make of that?
Yes, normally here in the Gambia at 10, a lot of people are at home, and that's a bad time for a lot of people. But we still have some people at that time very active, and when I spoke to the minister, I raised that question to him, and according to him, they'll be reviewing measures like this. So now what they are doing is to assess the impact the curfew is having in our national response to COVID-19, whether it's reducing the number of community transmission. Well, time will come, they will be able to at least determine or to get the result. They will be monitoring the results of their action. And according to him, this curfew will be subjected to review. If it demands that we draw the time to around maybe 9 or 8, that will happen. But now this is put in place, and they will be monitoring the situation to see whether there has been improvement.
So it seems as if we are making it up as we go along. There are no templates, but at least with the safety valve of regular review,
absolutely,
we'll see what happens. Thank you very much there, Mr. Choi. During the week, we celebrated International Youth Day. The theme this year has been Youth Engagement for Global Action. Let's just take a look at this clip.
I don't believe that we should be celebrating young people just once every year. I believe that the work that young people are doing and the impact it has been yielding, I believe young people should be celebrated throughout. Though International Youth Day is a day that is meant to commemorate and celebrate the efforts that young people have been doing, and which this is something that I actually deeply appreciate, because at least we have a day that actually celebrates young people, even with the little or minimal support that we're having and resources in the implementation of our different activities.
That's it, Mr. Choi. We've just heard from that young activist saying that, well, young people shouldn't be just celebrated on these designated days. They should be celebrated every day. What do you think of that? And the occasion as well, International Youth Day.
So, it is a special day when, the world celebrates young people. What she is saying, or what she has said, is really true. Young people should be celebrated every day. And my perspective of that, celebrating young people means giving them, the right environment or atmosphere for them to harness their potential in fulfillment or realization of their goals. So here, when we keep celebrating young people every year, or annually, without having a system which empowers them, a system that gives them the opportunity to harness their potential, a system that gives them employment, a system that makes them feel safe in their own country for the realization of their goals, that is quite necessary. But if that is not in place, and then we keep celebrating young people, why do we celebrate them? What are we celebrating them for? So, in my own perspective, the right atmosphere and environment should be in place, creating jobs for young people, putting them, at the forefront of realizing the goals of our country.
Absolutely, and when we look at it, people these days talk about the youth dividend, that so many young people, so they put the potential in the future. But again, when you look at the realities on the ground, 40 to 45% of youth in this country, they are unemployed. So you need to create these channels, these avenues where they can harness their talents, their creativity, whatever, so that we can genuinely reap the youth dividend. Otherwise, we're going to have social unrest.
Absolutely, and that is what is happening. We're seeing the consequence of that. In the Gambia, we've been seeing this, it happening, and seeing an exodus of young people migrating to the Western countries in search for greener pastures. And the reality is that in our country here, young people are not empowered. Empowering young people means giving them job, giving them the right training, giving them a safe environment, putting them, getting them involved in whatever government is doing. But it seems that young people are usually involved in the development of our country, especially during campaign. Of course, campaign is very important during time of election. Politicians will be going around under the banner of young people, supporting young people. So celebrating young people demands that we provide them with the necessary skills, we provide them with the necessary employment, training, etc., so that they will be able to realize their goal. They are the future of this country, of any country.
Absolutely, you're correct there. Thank you very much, Lamin Choi, for your views there. And next, to Bakau. The youth of Bakau have come up with an initiative in their contribution to our battle against the COVID-19. Let's just take a look at this clip.
COVID-19 has been an issue increasing every single day. It is increasing. This thing is not even increasing one after the other, but it is increasing rapidly, seriously. So we see to it that this thing, we have to, it says necessary that we have to form an association to come and then start sensitization and the community, starting from Mile 7, Bakau Newtown, Fajara South, up to Bakau. This thing is something concern to all of us.
That's it there. We've decided to come together to have a sort of rapid response team. One would have thought that these things would have been in place already. So it was quite interesting there in Bakau.
It is very important, and fighting COVID-19 demands, collaborative effort, between the government and the people. So it is not only the duty or responsibility of the government to fight COVID-19, but getting the population on board towards a direction really will bring meaningful developments, and that is quite impressive of the Bakau, community of young people.
Absolutely. I mean, the success really depends on whether you bring everybody on board. We hope that other groups around the country might emulate something like that. That's a pretty good example there. Thank you very much, Mamadou Lamin Choi. Now, to our next story. So, the residents of, Latrikunda, Sabiji, Talinding, and Joshua, they've been really very unhappy with the stench, given what had been dug up recently in their gutters. Let's just take a look at this clip.
Waste management and disposal remain important but expensive problems for local government authorities, accounting for a significant part of their financial expenditure. Recently, in some areas, waste material trapped under gutters were removed to create an easy flow of water during the rainy season and help prevent occurrence of flash floods. However, the rubbish was dumped on the busy Westfield-Brikama highway for 3 days without being collected and disposed of, thereby affecting the free flow of our already congested traffic and causing a very unpleasant odor for residents and passers-by.
Thank you very much. I mean, this has been an ongoing problem, isn't it? We've had so many reports, and even when you walk down any street, any road, anywhere, you tend to see rubbish all around. Surely it's high time we have a kind of special strategy to clean our neighborhoods.
Cleaning our neighborhood also requires that we prepare ourselves, we prepare our people towards that direction. The attitude of people really needs to be changed. Of course, government has a role, local government authorities have a role to play in managing waste in our premises areas, but the people's attitude towards that is really very poor. People throw litter around, dispose of waste anywhere, and then we expect local government authorities to do something. Of course, it is their responsibility, but we have to be, when both government and the people are responsible, then problems like this wouldn't happen. But the local government authorities also must do much in ensuring that this is reduced.
Absolutely, you are very right there. Collective outcomes, in many ways, they depend on individual habits. In many ways, the government's got something to do, but again, people must do our bit as well. Thank you very much there, Mr. Choi. And we'll go for another short break. Stay tuned. The GCCI had a telethon. How much money was raised? Where was it spent? When we come back.
Right time, right place, right price. Promote your product, business, and brand to millions of viewers nationwide or across the globe. Call QTV Marketing on 32-44444 or email us at marketing@qtv.gm for all your advertisement needs. QTV Gambia, right place.
Welcome back to the Weekend Review. Our next story, the GCCI telethon, as a response, this was businesses in the Gambia, the response to the battle against COVID-19, and they had a telethon, and of course, whatever money was generated, people would be interested in knowing where that was spent. Let's take a look at this clip.
We also responded to the call of the councils and allocated about $2 million for each council across the country, which was about 1.6 million. And the issue of personal protective equipment also came in. We had a request from the Ministry of Health to support in the area of personal protective equipment. This request was also approved by the board because there is a governing board for the COVID funds. It was approved by the board, and about 10% of the funds actually went into that particular request.
That's it. So Mr. Choi, surely a very good thing. I mean, people contributed, then you have to give account of where you spend the money.
It was a promise made and a promise fulfilled when the telethon started, the fundraising started. And I think it's quite important that GCCI takes the responsible decision of coming back to the people and then telling them where the money has been spent.
Absolutely. But for me, what was quite interesting there was that they had spent some money. I mean, was it the Ministry of Health had requested some money, so they were given some. And then the Ministry of Education also did their own request. And then the Ministry of Interior also did their own request. Then I sort of thought that shouldn't you have had sort of like a body, and then you will take all of these things into account? Doesn't it seem disjointed that every ministry you have to do your own thing, whereas a body one expects sort of like a linked up kind of response team? What did you make of that? Or what did you make of that? All these different ministries making their requests.
Yes, I would have expected in some instances, some of them, requested through the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health, facilitated it. And, that was what happened. the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education made their requests for the GCCI, to at least disburse some or make some allocation, to support them. Of course, always there are room for improvements, and I believe that could have been something good which would have been put in place.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud Lamin Choi, for your views there. Now, to Russia, the first country in the world to say that they've developed a vaccine for COVID-19. Let's just take a look at this clip. The World Health Organization has, however, said that it cannot evaluate the vaccine because it has not received enough information on it. And scientists around the world have also expressed concern over the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. That's it. I'm quite interesting there, but for us, we've been following the WHO for a very long time. They said that they couldn't evaluate the efficacy of this vaccine. Your views on that? What do you make of it?
Yes, Russia, the World Health Organization plays a very significant role in getting the countries together towards fighting COVID-19. And one would expect, if the right or proper measures are put in place by Russia to be responsible enough as a member country to the World Health Organization, then they would have at least, involved experts of the World Health Organization. So when that doesn't happen, there seems to be something fishy. And perhaps one has to be very cautious when it comes to the development from Russia in terms of vaccine. Absolutely.
Or from anywhere else. We remember the Madagascar solution. Right now, nobody is talking about that. They've just decided to just keep it quiet. Thank you very much there. And finally, to the United States. According to some analysts, as President Trump is doing really his darndest to bring about racial division, well, the Democratic Party has decided to go the other side. They've decided for the first time to select a woman, a black woman for that matter, as the Joe Biden's running mate. Let's just take a look at this clip. Kamala Harris had been a fierce rival to Joe Biden for the top job, but once Biden had won and announced in March that he would pick a woman to be his running mate, many political observers saw her pretty much as the front runner, even though she was in contention with a stellar cast of candidates such as Susan Rice, the national security advisor in Obama's administration. Mr. Choi, this was truly a groundbreaking decision. Even though they've had Obama, but still this was a woman. And Joe Biden, quite interestingly, he served a black president and now has got a black person to serve him, as it were. Mm-hmm. What do you make of that? Absolutely, and it reminds people of what happened in 2008. The opportunity, the grandeur, Obama, had during that time. Now we're having, a black woman for the first time, becoming a running mate of a major political party, in the U.S. It's quite significant at a time when, different problems are happening. America seems to be divided on, different issues, especially when it comes to police brutality, Black Lives, movements, protests, etc. So I think it's a very significant development, and it will at least help in some way or the other. Absolutely, and quite really, fascinating times in the U.S. But here, when you look at the two, Biden, he'll be 78 in November. Really, the oldest American president ever. When Reagan left, he was 77. Kamala is 55. Quite fascinating. She's well poised. She'll be relevant, one imagines, for a very long time. Absolutely. It was a very good pick. It was a good pick. And as you put it, the oldest, if he becomes, the president of the U.S., these are two people who had different, views on different policies. So they will have to come together and then compromise. Politics is all about compromise in moving, a country towards the right direction. Absolutely, the art of compromise. And here, just to imagine that if the president, we all know that we have to step down, the vice president automatically steps up. Fascinating, tantalizing prospects for anything. All things can happen. And thank you very much, viewers, for joining us on the Weekend Review. And don't forget, stay safe, wear your masks, and don't forget the 3 C's, as they call it: closed spaces, crowded places, and close contact settings. Thank you very much. Until the next time, I'm Mamadou Mbodj. I was joined today by Mamadou Lamin Choi.